We thought the worst thing in the forest was the dark. That was before the dogs learned how to stand on their hind legs. The Arklay Mountains had always pressed down on Raccoon City like a secret waiting to rot. Pine trees packed so tight the wind couldn't breathe between them. Dirt roads that swallowed headlights, and above it all, the old Spencer Mansion stone ribs rising from the earth, windows blind and watching. Umbrella called it a private estate. We called it untouchable. The night everything began, I was stationed at the outer gate. Contract security, good pay, no questions. We were told there had been an incident in the woods, a containment issue involving experimental animals. Our job was simple: sweep the perimeter, report abnormalities, maintain silence. We did not know we were guarding the mouth of something starving. It started with the smell. Not decay exactly, more like wet iron and antiseptic, like a hospital room left open in the rain. The radios crackled with low static, as if the mountain itself was trying to speak. Then Dawkins saw movement in the hedges. He joked about deer. The deer stood up, its spine lengthened under torn fur. The head twisted too far, jaw splitting at the hinge. It stared at us with eyes that had forgotten blinking. When it charged, it moved faster than muscle should allow. Dawkins fired 3 rounds into its chest. The body jerked but did not fall. It hit him with a sound like a car crash in miniature. They both disappeared into the bushes, thrashing. His screaming lasted 6 seconds. Then came silence. We raised our rifles. Training told us to advance. Instinct told us to run. That was when the second shape emerged, not from the hedges, but from the trees behind us. It did not shamble. It did not roar. It walked. Black armor absorbed what little moonlight bled through the canopy. The cowl's ears cut into the sky like broken cathedral spires. A cape hung heavy down his back, unmoving despite the wind. For a moment, I thought Umbrella had deployed something new. Then one of the men whispered a name I had only heard in rumors from Gotham: Batman. He did not acknowledge us. He stepped past our line as if we were furniture. The hedges exploded outward. 3 infected hounds lunged at once, skin sloughing, ribs visible, teeth elongated into needles. The first struck his chest. The sound was wrong. Not flesh meeting flesh, but bone cracking against reinforced plating. The animal's jaw shattered on impact. Before it hit the ground, his gauntlet came down in a brutal arc. The skull collapsed inward like wet clay. The second leapt for his throat. He caught it midair. There was no theatrical spin, no shouted vow. He simply twisted. Vertebrae separated with a sound too clean to belong in nature. The third tried to circle behind him. He did not look. A small device flicked from his wrist. A pulse of concussive force erupted outward. The hound's body lifted off the gravel and struck the iron gate hard enough to bend steel. He stood still afterward, listening, as if the violence were only background noise. I had expected something else from a legend. A speech, a warning. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the mansion. The front doors opened. No one had touched them. They parted slowly, deliberately, like a host inviting a guest to dinner. A light flickered on in the upper west wing. Then another. The house was waking up. Behind us, Dawkins crawled out of the hedges. Or what remained of him. His uniform was soaked dark, his throat torn open to the spine. His eyes moved without recognition. He tried to speak. Only blood came out. We lowered our weapons. Not because we lacked courage, because we did not understand what we were fighting. Batman knelt beside Dawkins for half a second. The visor lenses adjusted, scanning, assessing. I saw the reflection of red vitals cascading across the cowl. He did not hesitate. 2 fingers pressed against Dawkins' temple. There was a sharp crack. Mercy delivered like a mechanical function. He rose and stepped toward the mansion. One of our men shouted, "You can't go in there. It's not cleared." The black figure paused at the threshold. When he spoke, his voice was not theatrical gravel. It was low, precise, almost clinical. How long since first exposure? No one answered. We did not know. He entered anyway. The doors closed behind him, with a sound like a vault ceiling. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the first scream came from inside the mansion. It was layered human and something underneath it, something bubbling. Gunfire echoed through corridors too large for comfort. Heavy impacts rattled stained glass windows. A chandelier crashed somewhere deep within. The house shuddered. Another scream. This one cut short. We moved closer despite ourselves, drawn by the instinct to witness catastrophe. Through a side window, I caught a glimpse of movement, dark armor against marble flooring slick with blood. A figure twice his size charging down a grand staircase, flesh pale and stretched, claws carving trenches into wood. The creature struck him with enough force to splinter the banister. They vanished into dust and falling debris. A moment later, the entire east wing trembled. An explosion bloomed behind the glass. Not fire force. Windows burst outward in a rain of crystal. Something massive crashed through them and landed in the courtyard fountain. It rose, 7 feet tall, muscle overdeveloped to grotesque symmetry, one eye obscured by exposed brain tissue pulsing under translucent membrane. It turned its gaze toward us, and then toward the mansion doors, which were already opening again. That man stepped out, cape scorched at the edges, one gauntlet cracked open to reveal sparking circuitry beneath. Black fluid, not entirely human, dripped from his forearm. He looked smaller than the thing in the fountain, but he did not look afraid. The Tyrant roared a sound that vibrated in the sternum. It charged. The ground cracked beneath its stride. He moved to meet it. Their collision shook gravel from the driveway. Fist met reinforced bone. The impact traveled through the air like a shockwave. The creature staggered but did not fall. Its claw raked across his chest, scoring armor deep enough to expose reactive gel beneath. He did not retreat. Explosive gel splattered across the Tyrant's ribcage. The detonator clicked. The blast tore muscle from bone. But before the smoke cleared, I saw something impossible. The muscle was knitting, fibers writhing like worms finding each other again. The virus was learning. Inside the mansion, alarms began to howl. Not security alarms, containment alarms. Somewhere below the house, something else had been disturbed. Batman glanced toward the open doorway. For the first time, I saw hesitation. The Tyrant took advantage of it, its fist connected with his helmet. The cowl dented. He flew backward into the stone steps hard enough to fracture marble. The cape lay twisted beneath him like a fallen flag. The creature advanced. We raised our rifles. He raised one hand, not in surrender, in command. "Fall back," he said. The tone brooked no argument. We retreated toward the tree line as the battle resumed, more violent now, less measured. Every strike from him was efficient. Every adaptation from the Tyrant was faster than the last. Behind them, the mansion groaned. From the open doorway, shapes began to spill. Not dogs, not human, something in between. The virus was no longer contained to a laboratory. It was dispersing through broken windows, through ruptured ventilation shafts, into the forest air. He had come to destroy the source. Instead, he had fractured its shell. The first infected cleared the threshold and turned its clouded eyes toward us. Its mouth opened in a wet imitation of speech, and in that moment, as the forest filled with the sound of spreading hunger, I understood something no report would ever admit. The mansion had been a cage. He had just broken the lock. Behind me, Raccoon City slept, unaware. Ahead of me, the legend fought like a machine against a monster that could not die. Above us, the lights in the upper windows flickered one by one, as if something deeper underground had just been awakened. And the night did not feel like rescue. It felt like ignition. History will say he was forged by tragedy. History prefers clean beginnings. A child in an alley, a gunshot, peril scattering like stars across wet pavement, a vow whispered over 2 cooling bodies. But tragedy alone does not build armor. Tragedy alone does not hollow a man carefully enough that he can pour war into himself and call it justice. Before the mansion, before the virus, before Raccoon City learned the word sterilization, there was a boy who stopped sleeping. Gotham did not weep when Thomas and Martha Wayne died. The city inhaled and continued rotting. Crime statistics dipped for a week out of spectacle, then resumed their climb. Memorials gathered dust, flowers browned. The boy remained. He did not scream at the funeral. He watched the dirt hit the coffin lids and counted the seconds between impacts. He learned early that grief is a rhythm, and rhythm can be mastered. I once worked custodial detail at Wayne Tower during renovations. They said the heir was traveling the world training, studying. The tabloids called him reckless, partying, burning through inheritance. They did not see the crates arriving after midnight. Medical equipment that never passed through official customs. Prototype alloys, chemical reagents flagged for military research, neuroelectrical mapping systems purchased through shell corporations. He built something beneath the city. Not a sanctuary, a laboratory. The first transformation was sleep deprivation, 72 hours awake. Then 96. He recorded the hallucinations clinically, documented how fear sharpened edges of perception, how the mind, when starved, stopped filtering shadows. He wanted to understand criminals. Instead, he dissected himself. The second transformation was chemical. Adrenal modulators refined from battlefield injectors, pain suppressants calibrated to delay shock without dulling cognition, microdoses of experimental compounds designed to increase reaction time at the cost of long-term neural stability. He signed his own consent forms. There was no destiny in it, only escalation. He studied anatomy until he could predict how a rib would crack under pressure, studied ballistics until he knew precisely how much force ceramic plating must absorb to prevent internal hemorrhage, studied fear responses in test subjects, how darkness, sound frequencies, and sudden vertical presence could paralyze the average human for 1.8 seconds. 1.8 seconds is enough to break a wrist or a neck. The suit came last. Layer upon layer of adaptive armor molded not for comfort, but for resistance. The cowl interfaced with retinal projections, feeding data directly into peripheral vision. Early prototypes caused migraines so severe he blacked out mid-test. He adjusted the current, reduced the voltage, accepted the scar tissue. Every improvement demanded something back: cartilage degradation in both knees, microfractures and knuckles that never fully healed, elevated cortisol levels that kept his heart from resting even in daylight. Power did not arrive in a flash of cosmic radiation. It arrived in increments, and each increment removed a piece of the man who had once watched pearls scatter on pavement. He told himself it was necessary, that Gotham required something inhuman to fight what it had become. He was correct. But he misunderstood the exchange rate. The more monstrous the city grew, the more he recalibrated himself to match it. Criminals began whispering about a shape on rooftops, a figure that dropped without warning, that broke bones in darkness and vanished before police sirens could crest the block. He cultivated the myth carefully. He altered his voice through a modulator that scraped the edges of human range. He engineered entrances through smoke and shattered glass. He left criminals tied in positions that forced their bodies to ache until morning. Fear became his currency, and like all currencies, it inflated. Gotham adapted. Criminals armed themselves heavier. Gangs consolidated. Psychopaths emerged who did not fear the dark but worshipped it. Every escalation from him created counter-escalation in return. He did not see that as failure. He saw it as proof of impact. When intelligence flagged unusual disappearances near Raccoon City, hikers found dismembered autopsy reports sealed under corporate authority. He analyzed the pattern as he would any crime wave, but the data did not behave. Bite wounds that showed tissue necrosis inconsistent with known pathogens. Survivors displaying aggression beyond stimulant profiles. Police reports amended after corporate intervention. Umbrella. A corporation with philanthropic fronts and laboratories too far removed from regulatory oversight. He traced shell companies, found shipments routed through mountain estates, Spencer Mansion. He did not inform federal authorities. He did not trust them. He had learned long ago that institutions protect themselves first. If a virus existed, it would be weaponized before it was cured. He could not allow that. This was the justification. He boarded the jet under cloud cover, leaving Gotham's skyline flickering beneath him like a dying circuit board. Alfred asked no dramatic questions, only this: "Are you prepared for something you cannot intimidate?" He did not answer, because intimidation had never been the true weapon. Preparation was. He believed he could dismantle any system if he found its load-bearing points. He believed horror, at its core, was human. He had never encountered horror engineered to replicate faster than fear could contain it. The Arklay Mountains appeared beneath the jet like a blackened spine. Thermal scans showed abnormal heat signatures under the mansion's foundation, movement inconsistent with wildlife. He felt no dread, only calculation. The boy who had counted seconds between coffin impacts now counted ventilation shafts, guard rotations, electrical redundancies. He told himself he was preventing catastrophe, but catastrophe has gravity, and sometimes the act of interference accelerates descent. He infiltrated the estate through forest canopy, disabling perimeter cameras with electromagnetic pulses precise enough not to alert central monitoring. Inside the mansion walls, he detected reinforced substructures beneath the main hall, hidden elevators descending into labs not present on architectural records. He accessed one. The doors slid open into white corridors too sterile for a country estate. The smell hit him first. Antiseptic, blood, and something fermenting. The first containment chamber was cracked from inside, claw marks etched through reinforced glass. He documented everything through the cowl's recording system. Evidence, proof, justice. He placed shaped charges at structural nodes, intending controlled demolition of laboratory sections. But he underestimated the ecosystem. Viruses do not exist in isolation. They interact. He breached one chamber to retrieve data drives from a central console. The sudden change in pressure triggered failsafe releases. Airborne particulates vented into adjacent corridors. Secondary subjects kept in stasis activated under emergency protocols. He heard movement above him in the mansion proper. Security teams scrambling, creatures responding to vibration. His presence, efficient and precise, functioned like a stone dropped into stagnant water. Ripples became waves. By the time he ascended back into the grand hall, the estate was no longer dormant. The mansion was not merely a laboratory. It was an organism, and he had cut into it. The first Tyrant prototype was never meant to awaken that night. Power systems rerouted under stress. Failsafes misfired. Containment pods opened. When the creature emerged from its suspension cradle, its heart rate spiked in response to nearby kinetic disturbances. It followed the noise of destruction. He did not know he had triggered its release. Not at first. By the time he realized something large was moving through the ventilation shafts toward the main staircase, the mansion's lights were already flickering in unstable patterns. The boy who studied fear believed he had mastered it. But fear in a laboratory is sterile. Fear in a system that mutates is exponential. As he stepped through the front doors to confront the first wave of infected hounds, he believed he was containing an outbreak. He did not yet understand he had converted a sealed experiment into an airborne event. Back in Gotham, crime statistics dipped slightly during his absence. No one knew he was gone. In Raccoon City, the first hospital admission for unexplained bite trauma was logged 3 hours after he breached the lab. Cause listed as animal attack. By morning, 5 more would arrive. By nightfall, the city's emergency rooms would begin to overflow. He fought the Tyrant in the courtyard, believing the battle was local. Contained. Solvable. He did not see the ventilation plumes drifting down the mountain roads. Did not hear the coughs beginning in suburban kitchens. Did not watch the river carry diluted viral load past playgrounds. Power is not merely the ability to strike. It is the ability to alter systems. And systems, once disturbed, do not reset politely. As the mansion groaned in the forest filled with spreading infection, the boy who had once sworn to prevent senseless death made a decision he would never articulate aloud. If the source must be destroyed, collateral is inevitable. He had said similar things before in quieter forms. Broken bones to prevent future crimes. Intimidation to prevent larger violence. But this scale was different. This scale was civic, biological, irreversible. Above the estate, clouds gathered thick and low. Below it, something older than his trauma began to propagate. And in that widening circle of consequence, the myth of Batman shifted. Not savior, not avenger, but catalyst. By the time the first evacuation sirens echoed through Raccoon City's outskirts, the transformation was complete. Not of his body, not yet, but of his role. He had come to hunt a monster. Instead, he had become part of its release. And somewhere beneath the collapsing mansion, deep in the lab where containment protocols failed one by one, monitors blinked red across every screen. A new variable had entered the equation. Adaptive, relentless, human. Umbrella did not fear the virus. They feared losing control of it. And now there was something else in the system that refused control. The boy who studied fear had stepped into a structure designed to manufacture it. The structure was learning him in return. And outside the gates, Raccoon City slept, unaware that its future had already been rewritten in the seconds between a breached chamber door and a decision made without hesitation. We did not notice the infection at first. Cities rarely do. Raccoon City woke the morning after the mansion fire under a thin layer of ash. It clung to windshields, gathered in the gutters, softened the bright paint of playground equipment. The local news called it residual fallout from a structural blaze in the Arklay region. Umbrella issued a statement before noon. Minor incident. No environmental hazard. Residents advised to remain calm. We went to work. I stocked shelves at a grocery on Main Street. By 10 in the morning, 3 customers complained of nausea. By 11, one collapsed near the dairy aisle. He convulsed briefly, then went still. The paramedics wore standard gloves. They did not wear masks. At the hospital, the first wave of bite victims arrived before lunchtime. Official cause: animal attacks during forest patrol. Unofficial cause: something that did not die when shot. Nurse Halberg wrote in her intake notes that the wounds showed accelerated tissue necrosis, inconsistent with canine anatomy. The note was removed from the system within the hour. By evening, she developed a fever. The man in black was seen twice that day, once on a rooftop near the old rail yard, once in an alley behind St. Michael's Clinic, where he dropped from above and drove something pale-faced into the pavement hard enough to crack concrete. We heard the impact 3 blocks away. Some said he was helping. Some said he was hunting. From the ground, it was difficult to tell the difference. Sirens became constant by the second night. Police scanners flooded with fragmented reports. Subject non-responsive to taser officer down, repeat officer down, principal riot at Mercy Hospital. There was no riot. There were patients biting through restraints. The virus moved like rumor quick, invisible, unstoppable once repeated enough times. In the sewer system beneath downtown, viral runoff from the destroyed lab met municipal water channels. Filtration systems were not designed for weaponized pathogens. They were designed for rust and complacency. By dawn of the 3rd day, the first quarantine order was issued. National Guard trucks rolled in with canvas flaps drawn tight. Soldiers wore masks that fogged from their own breath. Checkpoints rose overnight, dividing neighborhoods into grids. Umbrella representatives stood beside government officials during press conferences. Calm, polished, temporary containment measure. The word containment felt fragile in the mouth. That afternoon, I saw him up close. The sky was the color of bruised fruit. Smoke from the mountains still lingered in thin, dirty strands. A group of us were huddled near the pharmacy, waiting for distribution of antiviral medication that may or may not have existed. A scream cut through the line, not distant, immediate. A woman staggered from the laundromat across the street, her arm hanging in strips, eyes cloudy but aware enough to beg. "Please," she said. Then she lunged, not at us, at her own child. He appeared between them before she could close the distance. I did not see where he came from. One moment, the space was empty. The next, it was filled with black. He intercepted her mid-motion, twisting her body away from the boy. She bit through the reinforced plating at his forearm joint, not deep enough to breach fully but enough to leave a mark. He froze for a fraction of a second. Calculating, the woman clawed at his cowl, sobbing, something human still flickering behind infected eyes. "Help me," she whispered. He held her face steady. 2 fingers at her temple, the same motion as at the mansion gate. The crack was quieter this time. Her body went limp. The boy screamed, not in gratitude, in horror. Batman stood slowly, black gauntlet slick. He looked at the child for one suspended moment. There are choices that split a life into before and after. He could explain. He could comfort. Instead, his gaze shifted to the rooftops, scanning for movement. Because 2 more infected were already sprinting down the sidewalk, he threw a smoke pellet at the ground. The world vanished into gray. When it cleared, he was gone. The boy remained, screaming beside his mother's body. We began to understand something then. He was not here for us. He was here for the center of the outbreak. And every time he engaged it, every time he detonated another underground chamber or collapsed another infected cluster with concussive force, the shockwaves rippled outward. Glass shattered 3 blocks from his impact sites. Gas lines ruptured beneath streets already fragile from neglect. Power grids flickered under electromagnetic interference from his equipment. The infected were drawn to him. High-frequency emissions from his comms array acted like a beacon. They swarmed wherever he moved, converging in numbers that overwhelmed barricades and checkpoints. When he cleared an area, it was quiet for minutes. Then, worse than before, on the 4th night, Mercy Hospital lost power. Backup generators failed after a surge traced to underground cable damage near the rail yard, damage consistent with explosive residue. In the dark, patients on ventilators suffocated. In the dark, infected moved faster. I was there when the lights died. We heard something pounding at the ER doors. Metal bending. Screams layered over each other until they blurred into a single sound. Then the glass gave way. He dropped through a skylight seconds later. Too late for the first row of nurses, just in time to prevent the second wave from reaching the pediatric ward. He moved like a machine among bodies striking, disabling, dragging the wounded behind overturned desks. He sealed a corridor with collapsing debris, isolating 30 infected on the far side. On the near side, 12 civilians were trapped. The debris also blocked their only exit. He calculated again, Explosives to clear the passage would compromise structural integrity. Delay would allow the infected to break through. He chose detonation. The blast cleared a narrow path. It also collapsed the stairwell above. 2 floors came down. When the dust settled, the pediatric ward was gone. The infected were gone too. The 12 civilians survived. 43 others did not. In the morning, officials called it necessary action under extreme circumstances. We called it something else. Outside the hospital, graffiti appeared on brick walls. BAT evils. Outbreak, go back to Gotham monster. Hunt's monstery rumor spread faster than the virus. Some said he worked for Umbrella, sent to silence whistleblowers. Some said he was immune and wanted to test himself against the infected. Some said he had brought the pathogen with him. None of us knew the truth. We only knew that wherever the black shape appeared, violence escalated. Umbrella adapted. They began releasing more advanced bioweapons into infected heavy zones, claiming field testing under containment protocol. Hunters with elongated claws stalked alleyways. Lickers clung to cathedral ceilings. Each new horror seemed designed not only to combat infection, but to study him. Cameras captured his fighting patterns. Sensors logged the frequency of his gadgets. He was no longer just a vigilante in their system. He was a variable, a catalyst, a source of data. The National Guard tightened the quarantine perimeter. Bridges were sealed. Rail lines cut. Helicopters patrolled overhead with orders to shoot down unauthorized departures. We were told the city would recover. We were told this was temporary, but the water tasted wrong. The air felt heavier each night. Funeral homes ran out of space by the end of the week. Bodies were cremated in makeshift pits near the river. Smoke mixed with mountain ash until the sky lost all color. On the 7th night, I saw him standing atop City Hall. Not fighting, not moving, just watching. Below him, sirens spiraled through the streets in endless loops. Fires burned unchecked in the industrial district. Infected wandered through intersections like confused commuters. He looked smaller than the chaos beneath him. For the first time, he did not seem like a predator. He seemed like a man measuring a loss too large to quantify. A helicopter approached from the north. Military markings. Orders crackled over loudspeakers. Citywide evacuation suspended. Remain indoors until further notice. Suspended, not canceled. Suspended. The implications settled in our bones. Containment was failing. Escalation was imminent. Batman remained on the rooftop as the helicopter circled. For a moment, searchlights locked onto him. Black armor, reflecting white glare. He did not flee. He did not signal. He simply stood there, cape hanging like a torn banner in chemical wind. Below him, a fresh wave of infected surged toward a barricade near the courthouse. Soldiers opened fire. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. He moved in, dropping from the roof into the swarm. Violence erupted again. Precise, efficient, pointless, because every body that fell seemed to be replaced by 2 more emerging from side streets and sewer grates. The system was collapsing faster than any single force could stabilize, and in that collapse, the myth of a lone protector began to fracture. He was not saving the city. He was fighting its symptoms. The disease was already systemic. By the time dawn tried to break through smoke, the infection rate had doubled. Hospitals were overrun. Police precincts abandoned. Umbrella executives evacuated by private aircraft hours before the airspace closed. We were left with soldiers who did not know what they were containing, and a vigilante who refused to leave. History will one day say he fought bravely. History will show images of him dragging survivors from burning buildings, standing against abominations twice his size. History will not record the quiet moments after each battle, when he looked at the bodies and understood the math was no longer in his favor. That night, Federal Command issued a directive, classified at first, then leaked. If infection spread beyond projected containment models, sterilization would be authorized. We did not know the exact meaning then, but we felt its shadow. On the outskirts of the city, missile silos recalibrated targeting coordinates. In the streets, the infected kept walking, and somewhere beneath the rubble of the ruined mansion, Umbrella's deeper facilities continued to transmit data. Adaptive metrics, combat analysis, notes on the armored subject's resistance levels. The virus was evolving. So was the response. And caught between mutation and intervention, Raccoon City began to realize something too late. We were no longer being rescued. We were being measured, and the man in black, fighting endlessly against the tide, was not a cure. He was another variable in an experiment that had already outgrown him. By the end of the week, the sun no longer reached the ground through smoke. By the end of the week, we stopped asking when this would end. We began asking how, and above us, on another rooftop scarred by blast marks and claw gouges, he stood again in silhouette, watching a city unravel under the weight of forces he had come to stop and perhaps had helped to accelerate. The city did not fall all at once. It was tightened. First the checkpoints, then the curfews, then the language changed. Infection cluster became hostile population. Evacuation delay became asset prioritization. Citizens became variables. By the 8th day, Raccoon City was divided into sectors labeled with letters instead of names. Main Street was now Sector C4. The school district became B2. The industrial zone, where smoke never stopped rising, was red perimeter. We were told to stay indoors. We were told help was coming. We were told many things. Umbrella representatives disappeared first. Their private aircraft left before the airspace closed. Their executives issued statements from distant studios with tasteful lighting and controlled concern. An isolated biohazard event, they said. Behind the scenes, their servers hummed. Every encounter between the armored vigilante and infected subjects had been recorded. Thermal signatures, strike force output, armor durability under corrosive contact. They replayed footage of him fighting the Tyrant prototype frame by frame. He adapts, one researcher noted. So does it, another replied. They did not speak of stopping him. They spoke of harvesting data. Because the virus was not only infection, it was iteration. And he was stress testing it. Above ground, Federal Command established a mobile operations center at the edge of the quarantine zone. Satellite feeds painted the city in false colors, heat blooms marking riots, structural fires, infected clusters. One bloom moved differently, fast, intentional. It cut through sectors, never lingering. They tagged it, Alafa Black. They knew his identity. It was not difficult. WayneTech materials leave distinct signatures under forensic analysis. His aircraft's stealth plating carried manufacturing anomalies unique to Gotham. They could have exposed him. They did not. Instead, they opened the channel. The first message reached his cowl while he was dragging a wounded soldier behind an overturned bus. Unidentified armored combatant, the voice crackled, calm and bureaucratic. You are interfering with federal containment protocol. He did not respond. He sealed the soldier's femoral wound with a compression clamp from his utility belt. The soldier stared up at him with something close to worship. Are we going to make it? He asked. Batman did not lie. Unlikely. He rose before the gratitude could form. The channel resumed. We are aware of your identity, Mr. Wayne. That stopped him. Not visibly. But the pause registered in telemetry. You have 30 seconds to acknowledge. He vaulted to the rooftop without answering. Drones tracked him immediately. Black-winged shapes against a blackened sky. The second transmission came encrypted directly into his neural HUD interface, a bypass no public agency should have possessed. Wayne Enterprises holds 12 federal defense contracts, the voice continued. Non-compliance may result in termination of all associated assets. It was not the threat to him. It was leverage against the infrastructure that kept Gotham breathing. He landed atop the courthouse steps, facing a barricade where soldiers aimed rifles at a swelling mass of infected pressing forward. The crowd behind the barricade, civilians, watched him with equal parts fear and expectation. He opened a private line. State your objective. There was no greeting on the other end. Objective, prevent viral spread beyond current perimeter. Method, escalation. He understood immediately. Sterilization was no longer theoretical. Evacuation incomplete, he said. Acceptable loss threshold recalculated. A pause. You are to assist in sector consolidation. Drive infected populations toward designated zones. Air support will handle the rest. In other words, herd them. He looked at the soldiers' trembling hands, at the civilians pressed against brick walls behind them, at the infected faces in the swelling crowd, some barely altered, some grotesque beyond recognition. Negative, he replied. There was a faint shift in the voice on the line. Not anger. Adjustment. Then you are operating counter to national security. Drones are authorized to track and, if necessary, neutralize. He cut the connection. Above him, one of the drones pivoted. Red targeting light brushed across his chest emblem. He moved before the missile launched. The explosion shredded the courthouse facade instead of his spine. Stone rained down on infected and civilians alike. screams layered into a single continuous note. The soldiers fired blindly into smoke. He tore the drone from the sky with a grapnel line, yanked it down, and crushed its sensor array under his boot. Another missile streaked past his shoulder and detonated against a bus, igniting trapped fuel. Fire climbed the street. He understood the equation now. He was no longer an asset. He was a complication. Umbrella watched from elsewhere. They intercepted the federal transmissions with ease. Corporate security leaned back in ergonomic chairs as the government tried to rein in the man who had breached their lab. "Let them exhaust each other," an executive murmured. Meanwhile, beneath the city, in forgotten utility tunnels and maintenance corridors, Umbrella's secondary labs activated contingency protocols. New subjects were released, not to stop the infection, but to observe how the armored vigilante responded to different stress patterns. Hunters deployed into sectors he frequented most, lickers seated near civilian shelters. They were shaping the battlefield around him, and the government, unable to control him directly, began shaping the air above him. The next night, loudspeakers rolled through the streets on armored vehicles. All remaining residents are ordered to proceed to Sector Delta for immediate evacuation. Sector Delta was the industrial district, downwind. Clustered, easy to isolate. We did not know that. We only knew it was the first organized instruction in days. Crowds moved like exhausted rivers toward the designated zone. He saw the pattern instantly. He intercepted the convoy leading civilians through the narrow canal corridor. "You're directing them into a kill box," he said to the commanding officer. The officer removed his helmet slowly. "I have orders." "So do I." "Yours from who?" the officer asked. The question hung heavier than the smoke. Batman scanned the canal, high walls, limited exits, overhead drone presence increasing. This was consolidation. He stepped in front of the lead armored vehicle. "You cannot proceed." The officer's eyes flicked to the sky, awaiting confirmation. It came in the form of 3 drones descending simultaneously. The red targeting lights converged, not on him, on the canal entrance, the civilians. He moved. Smoke pellets detonated across the corridor, blinding optics for seconds. Seconds were enough. He fired grapnel lines into opposing walls and collapsed a section of scaffolding, creating an improvised barrier. The first missile struck the barrier instead of the crowd. The shockwaves still knocked people off their feet. Children screamed. An old man's heart stopped under the pressure. He dragged as many as he could through side alleys, rerouting them into narrower streets less visible from above. Behind him, the canal burned. Federal Command labeled him hostile at 02:14 hours. Umbrella labeled him invaluable at 02:16. In the chaos, something else shifted. The infected began to move differently. Not random, not purely reactive. Clusters converged toward high conflict zones with unnatural precision. The virus was not conscious, but the systems directing it were. Umbrella had integrated behavioral algorithms into their bioorganic weapons. External stimuli, heat, electromagnetic pulses, concussive blasts became guiding signals. His gadgets were now lures, his combat style a beacon. He began to notice. Every time he deployed high-frequency sonar to map sewer tunnels, infected swarmed from adjacent grids. Every time he triggered an EMP to disable drones, hunters appeared minutes later, drawn by the spike. He was not merely fighting the outbreak, he was feeding it data. Back in the Mobile Operations Center, federal analysts studied the same patterns. "Subject is amplifying infection convergence," one noted. "Then remove the subject," another replied. Authorization codes moved up the chain. Target classification upgraded from ALPHAC to Black to Priority Threat. He felt the shift before the missiles came. The sky grew louder. This time, they did not aim near him. They aimed at him. The first missile struck 2 meters to his left, flipping him across the asphalt. Armor absorbed the brunt, but pain surged through microfractures in his ribs. He rolled before the second could lock. It followed. Adaptive guidance. He vaulted through a storefront window as the explosion gutted the building's facade. Inside, survivors huddled behind overturned shelves. They stared at him, not with relief, but accusation. "You brought them," a woman whispered. He did not argue. Because the targeting light followed him through the broken wall, he made a decision then, not about fighting, about disappearing. He cut external comms, disabled high-frequency output from his suit, reduced himself to minimal signature. It meant losing tactical advantages. It meant blindness in some sectors, but it also meant the infected clusters slowed their convergence. He retreated into the subway tunnels. Above ground, drones lost his signal. Federal command recalculated. Umbrella recalibrated. The leash had snapped, but leashes, once attempted, leave marks. In the tunnels, among flickering emergency lights and abandoned trains, he paused for the first time in hours. Blood seeped beneath cracked plating at his side. Not all of it infected. Some of it his. He sealed the wound mechanically. He did not inject additional stimulants. He needed clarity. For the first time since entering the mansion, he considered withdrawal, not retreat in shame. Strategic exit. Leave the city to military containment. Return with larger resources, but withdrawal would not reverse what had begun. The virus was systemic. The government was preparing sterilization. Umbrella was adapting in real time. He had become a third force in a conflict between corporation and state. Neither would tolerate him indefinitely. In the Dart Tunnel, he replayed surveillance from the canal. Missile trajectories, civilian casualty projections, orders spoken without hesitation. Protection had become occupation. Containment had become cleansing. Above him, loudspeakers echoed again through smoke-filled streets. All remaining residents, final evacuation window closing. Final. The word carried no ambiguity now. He rose from the tunnel floor. Above ground, the city tightened another notch, and somewhere deep beneath both government and corporation protocols, a new directive propagated through Umbrella's hidden network, Phase 2 deployment. Enhanced Tyrant variant, adaptive to armored resistance. Release pending optimal confrontation window. The system was learning. The leash had failed, so they would try a chain, and this time, it would not be attached to his neck. It would be wrapped around the entire city. By the ninth day, Raccoon City no longer resembled a place designed for living. It resembled a diagram. Red zones pulsed on satellite maps. Green zones flickered, then vanished. Heat signatures clustered into statistical inevitabilities. The language of survival was replaced with the language of probability. We stopped using street names. We used coordinates. Sector C4 fell at 0312. Sector B2 at 4447. The river boiled with chemical runoff and ash. And somewhere beneath it all, systems continued to hum. He moved differently now. No more skyline silhouettes. No more high-frequency sweeps. He traveled through shadows not as a symbol, but as subtraction-minimizing presence, reducing signal, learning the city's ruined anatomy by touch instead of sonar. The infected still roamed, but they converged more slowly. Umbrella noticed. Subject has reduced emission footprint, one analyst observed from a secured lab far from the quarantine zone. Then increased stimulus, came the reply. Phase 2 deployment initiated at Savafifio, deep beneath the destroyed Spencer estate, in a secondary facility shielded by layers of geological insulation, a containment cradle depressurized. The new Tyrant variant did not resemble the first. It was taller. Its right arm had been replaced with reinforced bioceramic plating grown over synthetic alloy. Neural nodes pulsed visibly along its spine. Its exposed cardiac cavity throbbed with amplified rhythm, each beat synced to an implanted transmitter. It was not merely muscle. It was networked. Umbrella had learned from the courtyard battle, learned from explosive gel, from blunt force fracture thresholds, from concussive wave tolerance. They had studied him. Now they would answer. The creature was released into the sewer grid at a calculated intersection 0.3 kilometers from the last confirmed sighting of Alafa Black. Above ground, Federal Command authorized Stage 2 containment. Additional drone swarms entered the airspace. Artillery platforms positioned along the perimeter powered up. Evacuation corridors narrowed. The city was being compressed. He felt it before he saw it. The infected began moving not randomly, not even toward high conflict, but toward him with unnatural consistency. Side streets emptied ahead of him, as if the tide were drawing back. That was when he realized. They were clearing space. He reached the subway interchange near Sector D1 and found it silent. Too silent. Bodies lay in patterns that suggested displacement, not struggle. Blood trails dragged toward a single-access tunnel. He stepped into it. The temperature rose immediately. Not from fire, from metabolism. A low vibration thrummed through the concrete subsonic, rhythmic, deliberate. Then it emerged. The Tyrant variant filled the tunnel's width, shoulders scraping tile, plated arm gleaming under flickering fluorescent light. Its single visible eye fixed on him with something almost analytical. The cardiac transmitter pulsed. Somewhere far above, umbrella screens displayed real-time biometrics from both combatants. Engagement begun, a technician whispered. The creature moved first, faster than the previous model. Its plated arms swung in a horizontal arc designed to break reinforced structures. He ducked. The wall behind him imploded. Concrete fragments sliced into his cape, shredding what remained. He countered with a magnetic grapnel, anchoring to overhead piping, swinging to deliver a kinetic strike at the Tyrant's exposed sternum. Impact. The creature staggered half a step. Adapted. Its free hand caught his forearm mid-retraction and drove him into the tunnel floor. Cracks spidered outward. Pain flared along his ribs. 2 fractures confirmed by suit telemetry. He triggered a microcharge at point-blank range. The explosion tore flesh from the Tyrant's shoulder. Beneath it, alloy glinted. Not bone. Not entirely. Umbrella had reinforced regeneration points. The torn muscle began to knit around metal. He rolled clear as the plated arm smashed downward, leaving a crater where his skull had been seconds earlier. The tunnel walls began to fail under repeated impacts. Water surged from ruptured pipes, mixing with sewage and blood. Above ground, tremors registered as seismic anomalies. Federal Command misinterpreted them as structural collapse from infection clusters. They did not yet understand the scale of what was happening beneath their containment lines. The Tyrant adapted in real time. It tracked his movement not only visually, but through thermal differentiation, through micro vibrations in the flooded floor. He reduced motion, shifted weight distribution, minimized heat output by venting internal coolant. The creature hesitated, then recalibrated. Umbrella's algorithms fed predictive adjustments through the implanted transmitter. The fight was no longer organic. It was iterative. He realized something then that chilled him more than the rising floodwater. They were not trying to kill him quickly. They were stress testing endurance, mapping fatigue thresholds. The longer he fought, the more data they harvested. He changed tactics. Instead of direct engagement, he targeted infrastructure. Explosive gel layered along support columns at calculated intervals. The Tyrant advanced, confident in its reinforced frame. He detonated. The tunnel ceiling collapsed. Thousands of tons of concrete and earth crashed down between them. For a moment, silence, then movement beneath rubble. The plated arm burst through debris, still functional. He did not wait for full emergence. He retreated upward through maintenance ladders, sealing hatches behind him with thermite charges. The surface greeted him with chaos. The subway collapse had ruptured a gas main. Flames spiraled into the sky. Infected scattered in panic, then regrouped toward the heat. Civilians trapped in adjacent buildings screamed from upper floors. He could not pursue the Tyrant immediately. He chose the fire. Scaling a crumbling facade, he broke windows and dragged survivors onto a makeshift line anchored to a lamppost. One by one, he lowered them to the street. Below, soldiers hesitated, orders unclear whether to assist civilians or maintain perimeter integrity. "Move," he barked. They moved. For a moment, it looked like something close to coordination. Then the drones returned. Federal Command, seeing the heat bloom and assuming uncontrolled outbreak escalation, authorized localized missile suppression. He saw the targeting pattern overlay his HUD seconds before impact. They were not aiming at him. They were aiming at the block, the fire, the survivors. He made the only choice available. He cut the line. The last 2 civilians were still attached. He wrapped his cape around them and leapt as the missile struck. The explosion swallowed the building. The shockwave tore through his armor, ripping weakened plating from his side. His back struck pavement hard enough to blur vision. When the smoke thinned, the block was flattened. The 2 civilians beneath his body were alive. The rest were not. Above, drones circled in mechanical indifference. On Umbrella screens, engagement data spiked again. The Tyrant had survived the collapse. Its vitals stabilized. It began ascending through an alternate access point. Convergence reinitiated. The city was being shaped into a battlefield with him at its center. He rose slowly, armor cracked, internal diagnosed. Sector Delta was never meant to hold this many bodies. Shipping containers formed narrow corridors lit by industrial flood lamps that hummed like dying insects. Smoke drifted low, trapped between steel walls. The air tasted metallic ash, fuel, blood. Civilians were packed behind barricades of forklifts and cargo crates. Soldiers stood in staggered lines, rifles trembling not from weakness but from saturation. They'd been shooting for days. Above them, drones held formation. Ahead of them, the infected advanced in a single heaving mass, and at the front of that mass, the Tyrant. Its silhouette cut through smoke like an approaching tower. The plated arm glinted under floodlight glare. The exposed heart cavity pulsed in visible rhythm, synced to Umbrella's remote telemetry. Batman stepped forward alone. No speech, no signal, only movement. The first wave hit him like collapsing scaffolding. He met it with efficiency that bordered on inhuman. Joint locks, precise fractures, blunt force strikes calibrated to disable without unnecessary motion. He conserved energy the way surgeons conserve blood, but there were too many. Every takedown left a body at his feet. Every body became an obstacle. Every obstacle narrowed maneuverability. His armor registered impact after impact. The suit's internal diagnostics scrolled across his HUD in red fragments. Left reeve, fracture. Stable ulnar microtear, progressing chest. Plate integrity, 63%. A hunter lunged from the flank-elongated claws carving across his shoulder. Ceramic plating split open. Beneath it, reactive gel hissed as it absorbed corrosive saliva. He countered with a concussive blast at point-blank range. The hunter's skull ruptured, bone fragments embedded into his own exposed armor seam. He did not pause to extract them. The Tyrant reached the perimeter. Soldiers opened fire. Rounds sparked against plated bioceramic and sank uselessly into regenerating tissue. The creature did not break stride. "Hold formation," someone screamed. The Tyrant swung its reinforced arm. The barricade disintegrated. Metal containers folded inward like tin. The shockwave threw civilians off their feet. Children vanished beneath falling steel. A forklift flipped, crushing 3 soldiers instantly. Batman moved through the chaos toward the creature. Not because he believed he could win, because he understood mass. If the Tyrant breached the civilian cluster fully, the death toll would multiply beyond recovery. He fired twin grapples into the Tyrant's chest cavity and vaulted upward, driving both boots into its exposed sternum. The impact dented metal and ruptured partially healed muscle. The Tyrant staggered half a step. Its free hand closed around his leg mid-rebound. It slammed him into the concrete hard enough to crater asphalt. Internal alarms spiked. Spinal compression, warning, respiratory capacity reduced. He tasted blood inside the cowl. The Tyrant lifted him by the throat. Up close, its eye tracked micro-movements. Adaptive, calculating. Umbrella's creation was not merely brute force, it was observation given muscle. His gauntlet deployed a microblade along the wrist seam. He drove it into the exposed cardiac node. The Tyrant roared not in pain, but in recalibration. The plated arm punched through his chest plate, not fully, but enough. Ceramic shattered. Reactive gel ruptured. The bat emblem cracked down the center. Something warm spread beneath the armor. His own blood. The Tyrant hurled him through a stack of containers. Steel screamed as it buckled. He landed inside a narrow corridor formed by stacked cargo units pinned under twisted metal. For a moment, there was quiet. Only the distant roar of combat. The hiss of ruptured gas lines. The hum of drones above. Inside the suit, the world narrowed. He initiated internal triage, out-assailant deployed pain suppression, Flimitid scanamataction, scran trace contaminants detected. The claw had penetrated deeper than plating, not a bite, but exposure. He injected an antiviral cocktail through the suit's emergency port. It would slow replication, not prevent it. Outside the container corridor, civilians screamed. The Tyrant advanced again. He forced himself upright. The cape, what remained of it, hung in shredded strips. The emblem on his chest was split, no longer symmetrical. He stepped back into the open yard. Floodlights flickered. Drone formation shifted lower. Federal Command had recalculated probability. If Sector Delta fell completely, sterilization would be immediate. If resistance remained statistically viable, delay was possible. He was now the variable determining that threshold. The infected surged around the Tyrant in widening arcs. Umbrella's embedded sonic emitters were guiding them into circular patterns, containment within containment. He understood. They were corralling both combatants. The city had become an arena. He changed strategy again, not toward the Tyrant, toward the emitters. He sprinted along the container tops, ignoring the fire along his ribs, ignoring the slight lag in his left arm where tendons had begun to fail. 3 precise batterings sliced into exposed control panels mounted on light poles. 1 emitter fell silent. The infected's formation wavered. The Tyrant's transmitter pulsed harder. Umbrella compensated. He destroyed a second. Then a third. The mass destabilized further. Infected began colliding into one another without coordinated flow. The Tyrant roared frustration, entering its movements for the first time. It charged him atop the container stacks. They collided mid-air. This time, he did not attempt a direct strike. He wrapped a high-tensile cable around the Tyrant's plated arm and anchored the other end to a crane support beam. As the creature landed and pulled forward, the cable tightened. The crane groaned. Steel screamed. He detonated explosive gel at the crane's base. The entire structure collapsed sideways, dragging the Tyrant beneath its weight. For a breathless second, it worked. The creature vanished under tons of machinery. Civilians gasped. Soldiers lowered rifles slightly. Then the crane shifted. The plated arm burst upward, lifting debris like paper. Regeneration tissue had begun sealing fractures already. Umbrella's monitors showed increased adaptation speed. Escalate stimulant feed, a voice ordered in a distant lab. The Tyrant's cardiac pulse doubled. It tore free. He landed heavily, knees buckling under cumulative damage. The suit's power reserves dipped below 40%. Cooling systems faltered. Inside the cow, sweat mixed with blood. His breathing came shorter now. The antiviral cocktail had slowed internal contamination, but his neural interface flickered once. A brief distortion. He blinked it away. The Tyrant advanced slower this time, not because it was weak, because it was learning distance. It had calculated his remaining mobility. Above, missile locks chirped again. Federal Command had reached a new threshold. He saw the targeting grid expand to encompass not only the infected, but the entire industrial sector. Time to impact under 2 minutes. He could disengage, grapple beyond the perimeter, leave the kill zone. The drones would fire. The district would burn. Sterilization would be justified. Instead, he ran toward the Tyrant again. He vaulted onto its back, ignoring the tearing sensation along his side, and drove a thermite charge directly into the base of its neural transmitter along the spine. The Tyrant reached back blindly, trying to dislodge him. He locked his legs around its torso and triggered ignition. White-hot flame erupted along the spinal column. The creature convulsed. For the first time, regeneration faltered. Umbrella's telemetry spiked in the chaos. Signal interference. Feedback loops. The Tyrant staggered into a stack of fuel drums. He kicked free and dropped away as the thermite burned through synthetic reinforcement. The Tyrant swung wildly, colliding with the drums. Fuel ignited. An explosion swallowed half the yard. The shockwave knocked drones off trajectory. Missile locks faltered momentarily. The Tyrant stumbled out of the fire-burning, flesh-slowing transmitter, melted into useless slag. But it was not dead. It roared again, less coordinated now, more animal than algorithm. The infected, freed from emitter guidance and Tyrant synchronization, lost formation entirely. They surged chaotically in all directions, some toward the perimeter, some back into the city, some toward the fire. Containment dissolved. Federal Command aborted immediate missile strike. Uncontrolled spread probability exceeded acceptable projection. He stood in the burning yard, armor cracked open, emblem broken, surrounded by screaming, scattering figures both human and not. He had disrupted Umbrella's control. He had disrupted federal containment. He had not saved the city. He had destabilized the system further. Civilians ran in blind panic through breached barricades. Soldiers fired into smoke without clear targets. The Tyrant, burning but still upright, fixed its damaged gaze on him once more. Even crippled, it advanced. He tried to raise his left arm. It lagged, motor response delay. Internal contamination creeping. The antiviral would not hold indefinitely. The Tyrant lunged again. They collided one final time beneath collapsing floodlights. Steel bent around them. Concrete fractured. Flames climbed higher. In the distance, sirens wailed. Not in rescue cadence, but in countdown. The industrial district was no longer defensible. Above the perimeter, missile silos recalibrated again. He realized then what the armor had become. Not shield, not symbol. A coffin he was carrying from fight to fight. Every strike splintered it further. Every use of force tightened the lid. The Tyrant's burning hand closed around his throat again, weaker now but relentless. He drove a final explosive charge into its exposed cranial cavity. Detonation at 0 distance. The blast tore them apart in opposite directions. When he hit the ground this time, he did not rise immediately. The Tyrant lay motionless amid fire and twisted metal. Regeneration stalled. Cardiac pulse fading. Umbrella screens went dark one by one. Phase 2 terminated. Above, drone formations pulled back slightly, not in mercy, in reassessment. He forced himself onto one knee. The armor along his chest was split wide enough to expose blood-soaked underlayers. The bat emblem hung fractured, one half nearly detached. Civilians stumbled past him without looking. To them, he was no longer legend. He was another broken thing in a city of broken thing. In the distance, a new sound began. Not sirens, not drones, deeper, heavier. Artillery platforms rotating into final position along the quarantine perimeter. Sector Delta had failed, containment had failed. The leash had snapped, and now the chain was tightening around the entire city. He looked toward the skyline through smoke and flame. For the first time since stepping into Spencer Mansion, the calculation in his eyes faltered. Because armor can absorb impact, but it cannot stop what is coming from the sky, and the sky was beginning to open. They said the house was empty now. They said the fire had eaten the worst of it. They said the screams had been ventilation settling, beams collapsing, wind in the chimneys. They lied because it was easier. The road to the ruins of the Spencer estate had become a border. Military tape fluttered like faded prayer flags. News vans idled at a distance. Lenses pointed toward a blackened silhouette against the gray sky. The mansion's carcass still smoked in places where the earth refused to forget. Beyond the tape, a temporary morgue hummed. A woman with ash in her hair told the cameras she saw him carry 2 children out of the West Wing before the explosion. She did not mention that he went back inside after the second child coughed blood onto his gloves. She did not mention the third child. She had buried him in her story because it made the ending easier. Inside the quarantine perimeter, men in white suits argued over jurisdiction. Patches bore the blue umbrella insignia of Umbrella Corporation. A black SUV waited with tinted windows, engine running. A man stepped out with a face like a sealed envelope. "Where is he?" the envelope asked. No one answered. Because the truth was not a location, it was a direction. Down. Bruce Wayne had not slept since the train yard. He did not believe in haunting. He believed in consequences. The cave under Wayne Manor was colder than it had ever been. The stone sweated. The computers glowed with captured footage from the mansion's corridors, infrared silhouettes jerking with insect spasms, biometric overlays pulsing red where human heat once registered green. On a central monitor, a slowed frame froze the moment a hunter's talon pierced Kevlar and kissed flesh. Bruce studied the footage as if he could negotiate with it. He replayed the moment he dragged the last survivor across marble tiles slick with blood. He replayed the way the floor buckled before the detonation charges. He replayed the tremor in his hands when the detonator clicked. The cave's air filtration system hummed. He had installed it after the first blood test. The viral load in his bloodstream was negligible, according to the analysis. Non-replicating fragments, dead strands. A statistical improbability. His immune system, conditioned by years of toxins and venoms, had walled off the invader. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the wall. It had teeth. Gotham did not sleep. It endured. Rumors moved faster than ambulances. People said the Bat had burned a mansion full of whistleblowers. People said he had destroyed evidence that pointed back to WayneTech contracts. People said the umbrella insignia had been seen on crates unloaded at the docks 3 nights before the outbreak. People said he had failed. That was the only thing that felt true. Alfred's voice cut through the cave like a scalpel. "You are not well." Bruce did not look up. "Define well. Your temperature has fluctuated 12 times in the last hour. Your white cell count resembles a civil war." "I've seen worse." "Yes," Alfred said softly. "You have." The cave lights flickered. Bruce stood too quickly. The world tilted. For a second, the stalactites above looked like ribs. The Batmobile, a carcass split open for study. A whisper crawled up his spine. Hunger. He swallowed it. "I need data on Umbrella's board," Bruce said. "Subsidiaries, shells, political donations. I want the architects." Alfred hesitated. "And if the architect is you?" Bruce turned. The cowl on its stand seemed to breathe. The first betrayal came quietly. A Wayne Enterprises research vessel was seized by federal order. The charges were vague: biohazard negligence, unauthorized pathogen storage, obstruction of federal investigation. The press conference was not. A podium bore the seal of the United States. Behind it stood a representative flanked by Umbrella's legal counsel. Slides displayed schematics of a lab funded in part by WayneTech grants. "We have reason to believe," the representative said, "that oversight failures contributed to the proliferation of experimental viral strains within domestic borders." Oversight failures. Bruce watched from the cave as the words became a verdict. He had funded antiviral research. He had invested in countermeasures. He had believed transparency would be enough to keep corporations honest. He had been wrong. Umbrella did not deny the outbreak. It reframed it. An isolated incident, their spokesperson insisted, logo gleaming, rapidly contained thanks to cooperation with local authorities and, we might add, a certain masked vigilante. The slide changed to a photo of smoke rising from Spencer Mansion. The implication was surgical. He had destroyed evidence. He had interfered. He had made it worse. Gordon did not call. He came in person. The cave's entrance remained a secret in theory. In practice, secrets rotted. Gordon stood at the edge of the platform, hat in hand, eyes red. "They're forming a task force," he said. "Federal oversight. Biocontainment protocols. They want your tech. They want your labs. They won't get them." "They will," Gordon replied, "or they'll bury you." Bruce's jaw tightened. Gordon stepped closer. "Did you know?" "About Umbrella's deeper projects, no. About the risk, I knew there was one." Gordon's silence was heavier than accusation. "My daughter was at the fundraiser that night," he said finally. "The one where Umbrella pledged to rebuild the East End clinic. She shook hands with their chairman." Bruce saw Barbara's smile in his mind. Bright, uninfected. "She's safe," Bruce said. "For now." Gordon's gaze flicked to the monitors. "This doesn't feel contained." "It isn't." "Then what are you going to do?" Bruce looked at the cowl again. The whisper returned. "Feed. I'm going to finish it." The second betrayal had claws. A splinter faction within Gotham PD leaked surveillance footage of Batman entering a WayneTech warehouse the night before the Spencer incident. The footage was grainy. It did not show context. It showed him breaking a lock. It did not show him stealing antiviral prototypes to deploy in a building already overrun. Protesters gathered outside Wayne Tower. Signs read Monster and Cerberus BAT. Someone threw a brick. It shattered a window above the memorial wall listing names from the mansion. Glass fell like confetti at a funeral. Inside the cave, Bruce's pulse spiked again. He'd begun to hear it in the walls. A low thrum. Like something pacing behind drywall. His bloodwork showed anomalies, brief surges, and metabolic rate, micro repairs along the wound site that healed too quickly. He felt stronger in bursts. Faster. The cave's air seemed thin. He sparred with a training drone and shattered it in 3 strikes. He stared at his hands. Every use of power has a cost. He had written that once in a case file about another man. Now it felt like a diagnosis. Umbrella's counteroffensive was elegant. They offered partnership, a joint task force to ensure public safety, shared labs, shared data, a public statement of unity between Gotham's protector and global biotech leadership. Refusal would look like guilt. Acceptance would be contamination. Bruce met them in a glass conference room high above the city. The chairman's smile was an incision. "You and we," the man said, "are not so different. We build safeguards against chaos. We operate where governments hesitate. You monetize catastrophe," Bruce replied, "and you weaponize fear." Silence settled. "We can help you," the chairman continued. "Your blood test anomalies are not entirely mysterious to us." Bruce did not blink. "We can stabilize them, refine them, make them an asset rather than a liability." The word asset lingered. Bruce saw the future in a flash. A bat whose reflexes were sharpened by viral augmentation, whose bones knitted faster, whose endurance bordered on inhuman. A bat that could survive anything. A bat that would not need sleep. A bat that would not feel. "Get out of my city," he said. The chairman's smile did not fade. "It is not your city anymore." That night, Gotham burned in 3 places. A dockside warehouse erupted in green flame. A subway tunnel flooded with contaminated runoff. A clinic in the Narrows reported patients with fever and hemorrhage. Umbrella issued statements of concern. The federal task force deployed containment units. Batman moved through smoke. He broke into the warehouse and found canisters stamped with Umbrella's insignia. He traced shipment logs that looped back to shell companies tied to Gotham officials. He reached the subway too late. The water was red. A mother clutched a child whose eyes had gone glassy. "I saw him fall," the mother whispered when she recognized the cowl. "At the mansion. I thought that meant it was over." Bruce knelt. He had no antidote. He had only force. He injected the child with a broad-spectrum antiviral from his belt. It might buy time. It might not. The child's veins darkened. Bruce felt the whisper surge. "Take it." He recoiled. The schism split open in the cave. Alfred stood between Bruce and the suit. "You are not a laboratory," Alfred said. "You are not an experiment to be optimized. I need every advantage." "At what cost?" Bruce's hand hovered over a vial extracted from his own blood. He had isolated the viral fragments. He had hypothesized a controlled exposure, a measured enhancement. He could be stronger. He could end it faster. He could lose himself. Alfred's voice cracked. "Master Wayne, I buried your parents. Do not make me bury you twice." Bruce lowered the vial. For now. Gotham's resistance tried to organize. Community leaders, nurses, dock workers. They formed neighborhood watch groups armed with baseball bats and homemade masks. They refused federal relocation. They distrusted Umbrella's safe zones. One night, a warehouse meeting was raided, not by infected, but by men in tactical gear bearing federal insignia. Charges: unlawful assembly during a biohazard emergency. Protection had become occupation. Batman intervened. He disarmed officers, shattered rifles, dragged captains into the shadows, and whispered threats that would haunt their sleep. The footage leaked. Headlines read, "Vigilante attacks federal response. Gotham's savior became its saboteur." The third betrayal was the quietest. Barbara Gordon accessed encrypted channels she was not authorized to see. She traced the data stream linking Umbrella's board to a WayneTech subcontractor. She saw emails that suggested knowledge not of the outbreak, but of the risk. She hesitated. She sent the file to Bruce. He stared at it in the cave, jaw clenched. He had approved funding for a subsidiary that had then licensed equipment to Umbrella. Indirect, unintentional, real. He had fed the machine that chewed the city. The whisper grew louder. "You built this." Umbrella's chairman returned to Gotham with a convoy. This time, he did not ask. He held a press conference announcing a state-of-the-art biocontainment facility to be built on the ruins of Spencer Mansion. Jobs, investment, security. Out of tragedy, he said, comes progress. Behind the cameras, crates were unloaded. Batman intercepted one. Inside, a new strain. Not an accident, an escalation. Villains grow in response to heroes. Umbrella had learned from the mansion. They would not rely on isolated outbreaks. They would test Gotham, publicly. Bruce felt it before it happened, a spike in his bloodstream. A surge of heat. The wound at his side pulsed. He collapsed to one knee in the cave. Alfred rushed forward. Bruce's vision fractured into infrared and shadow. He heard heartbeats in the manor above. He smelled iron in the stone. The virus fragments were not dead. They were waiting. He forced himself upright. "I need to move," he said. "You need to rest. Rest is how we lose." Alfred's eyes shone with something older than fear. "Master Wayne," he whispered, "you are already losing." At the docks, the convoy split. Crates were loaded onto 3 trucks. Batman descended like a rumor made flesh. He tore open the first truck's doors and found canisters hissing. He disabled the driver. He moved to the second. Gunfire erupted. Federal agents, Umbrella security. They fired live rounds. Batman absorbed them in armor and bone. He broke ribs. He dislocated shoulders. He moved too fast. He felt good. Too good. Too good, the whisper purred. The third truck accelerated. He leapt, landed on the roof, punched through steel. Inside, a containment pod glowed. A prototype. Umbrella's next lesson. The pod cracked. Umbrella's next lesson. The pod cracked. Green mist spilled. Bruce's filters engaged, too slow. The mist kissed the seam of his cowl. He inhaled. The world sharpened. He saw the individual droplets in the air. He heard the agent's fear like a chorus. His muscles surged. He crushed the pod with one hand. The agents fled. He stood alone on the dock, breath ragged. The virus in his blood answered its kin. It did not attack. It harmonized. He felt the city's pulse. He felt every infected cell within a mile. He could track them. He could end them. He could become something else. Alfred's voice crackled in his ear. "Bruce, your vitals." He cut the channel. He leapt into the night. In the Narrows, a riot ignited. People believed the outbreak was deliberate now. They were right. They stormed a clinic rumored to be an Umbrella front. Umbrella's private security responded with gas. Batman landed between them. He should have calmed them. He should have protected them. Instead, the whisper guided his hands. He moved through the crowd like a blade. He disarmed rioters with unnecessary force. He incapacitated guards with bone-breaking efficiency. He felt the virus humming approval. A man with a broken arm stared up at him. "You're not helping," the man gasped. Bruce froze. The words cut deeper than talons. He stepped back. The riot swallowed itself. He disappeared. Back in the cave, he tore off the cowl. His eyes were bloodshot. Veins spittered along his neck. Alfred approached slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. "It's progressing," Alfred said. "I know. We can try to purge it. We don't know how. Umbrella did." The thought was a hook. Bruce gripped the console. "If I can control it, you cannot control corruption," Alfred said. "You can only choose how much of yourself you're willing to lose." Bruce looked at the bat symbol carved into the cave wall. Once, it had meant fear as a weapon against criminals. Now it felt like a warning etched into stone. He had fought monsters in a mansion. He had become a vector in a city. Outside, sirens wailed. Umbrella's facility construction began at dawn. Gotham was not healing. It was adapting. And somewhere in the dark, between heartbeat and breath, the virus whispered a promise: survive. No matter who you have to become. The cave lights dimmed, the city waited, and the bat, standing at the edge of himself, did not know which side would win. The infection did not roar. It negotiated. It began in whispers beneath the pulse, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Bruce felt it in the cave before he saw it in the bloodwork. His veins no longer carried only oxygen and memory. They carried something that listened back. Alfred adjusted the monitors without speaking. The screens mapped Bruce's nervous system in trembling lines of light. Spikes flared along the spine, then vanished. Cellular repair rates surged beyond baseline. Muscle fibers thickened microscopically, knitting with an efficiency that bordered on indecent. "You are accelerating," Alfred said at last. "I feel it. That is precisely what concerns me." Bruce sat rigid in the diagnostic chair. The wound from the dockside exposure had closed entirely. Not scarred, closed. The skin was smooth, as if the blade that had once opened him had never existed. But he remembered the blade. He remembered the child in the subway. He remembered the riot in the Narrows, and the way his fists had found bone too easily. Every use of power has a cost. He had always believed that meant bruises, broken cartilage, nights without sleep. He had not understood that the cost might be subtraction. Gotham's skyline flickered under a low, diseased sky. The biocontainment facility rose from the ruins of Spencer Mansion like a surgical instrument embedded in earth. White panels, floodlights, fences crowned with electric wire. The press called it renewal. The Narrows called it a graveyard. Umbrella's chairman stood before cameras and spoke of progress again. He invoked responsibility. He praised federal partnership. He thanked Gotham's local guardians for their continued vigilance. Bruce watched from a rooftop across the river. The chairman's face was serene. Behind him, trucks unloaded refrigerated containers. Bruce could hear the coolant systems humming from half a mile away. He had not been able to hear that before. The first time he lost time, it lasted 12 minutes. He had been tracking a cluster of infection signatures near Crime Alley 3 spikes in a condemned apartment building. He remembered entering through the window. He remembered the smell of rot. Then there was nothing. When awareness returned, the building was silent. 3 bodies lay on the floor. Their limbs were twisted, skulls fractured, spinal columns severed with surgical precision. The infection signatures were gone. He stood over them, hands slick. He had not drawn a weapon. The whisper in his blood felt satisfied. Bruce staggered back. He searched the apartment for survivors. There were none. On the wall, someone had written in chalk, "Please help." He did not remember whether they had been infected beyond saving. He did not remember if they had spoken. He remembered only efficiency. Alfred found him in the cave hours later, still in armor, staring at his gauntlets as if they might confess. "You have been gone 4 hours," Alfred said carefully. Bruce did not look up. "I lost 12 minutes. Alfred's jaw tightened. Bruce accessed the suit's internal logs. Data recorded biometric surges, violent motion, heart rate peaks consistent with extreme exertion. There were no audio recordings. He had disabled them after the mansion, unwilling to catalog more screams. "You are not dissociating," Alfred said quietly. "Your neural scans show continuity." "Then what am I doing?" Alfred did not answer. Because the answer was not a medical term. It was a transformation. Gotham began to notice. Reports filtered through the police band of a darker bat. Witnesses described him moving faster than before, striking without warning, leaving scenes cleaner than any forensic team could explain. "I saw him lift a man with one hand," a dock worker whispered to a reporter, "like he weighed nothing." "I heard bones snap like dry sticks," another said. The media divided itself. Some called it evolution. Others called it escalation. Umbrella called it predictable. In a private meeting room within the new facility, the chairman watched compiled footage. "The virus is integrating," he murmured. "Remarkable." A scientist beside him adjusted her glasses. "We did not anticipate compatibility at this level." "Adaptation favors the strong," he replied, "and he has always been strong. Should we intervene?" The chairman smiled faintly. "He is intervening for us." The next outbreak was not an accident, a controlled release in the industrial district timed with a shift change. Hundreds trapped. Batman arrived before federal containment. He did not hesitate. He tore through barricades and found workers convulsing on concrete. The infection progressed faster this time, veins blackening, eyes clouding within minutes. He moved among them like a surgeon without anesthesia. He broke necks before transformation completed. He severed spines with mechanical efficiency. He did not feel the impact in his wrists. He did not hear the pleas. He heard only the hum in his bloodstream, guiding him toward the next heat signature. A woman grabbed his cape. "Please," she rasped. "I'm not." Her pupils dilated. Her teeth sharpened. His hand moved before thought. When it was over, the warehouse was quiet. 43 bodies. Containment teams arrived to find no infected, only the bat standing in the center of it. Gordon pushed through the line. "What did you do?" he demanded. "What was necessary," Bruce said. Gordon stared at the dead. They were workers. They were vectors. They were people. Bruce's silence was answer enough. That night, Alfred attempted the purge. He had synthesized an antiviral compound derived from Bruce's earlier blood samples pre-doc exposure, before the integration accelerated. The theory was simple. Reintroduce a baseline immune response to destabilize the hybridization. Bruce lay on the medical table, cowl removed, eyes open. "If this fails," Alfred said, preparing the syringe, "it may accelerate the mutation. If we do nothing, it will accelerate anyway." Alfred injected the compound. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Bruce arched off the table. His spine bowed unnaturally. Veins along his neck pulsed black. His heartbeat spiked beyond measurable range. He did not scream. He ground his teeth until one cracked. The cave lights flickered as if the stone itself recoiled. Monitors erupted in red. Alfred held him down as best he could, whispering apologies that dissolved into static. After 30 seconds, that felt like a century, Bruce collapsed. His vitals stabilized. But the scans told a harsher truth. The virus had not weakened. It had adapted. The antiviral had become fuel. Alfred stepped back slowly. "I am so sorry," he whispered. Bruce opened his eyes. They were not entirely his. Gotham's underworld adjusted faster than its government. Crime families retreated underground, unwilling to test the new bot. Dealers abandoned corners. Smugglers rerouted shipments away from the docks. One man did not retreat. Oswald Cobblepot stood in the Iceberg Lounge's private office and studied reports with clinical detachment. "He's cleaning the streets," Cobblepot mused. "Bad for business, good for optics." "Should we lie low?" his lieutenant asked. Cobblepot tapped a newspaper showing the warehouse massacre. "Fear is a currency. If the bat becomes the bigger monster, we pivot." "Pivot how?" "Position ourselves as stability." Outside, sirens wailed again. Cobblepot smiled thinly. Let the city choke on its savior. Barbara Gordon tracked infection patterns across Gotham's grid. She saw what others missed. The outbreaks clustered around umbrella facilities. The timing was too precise. The containment always arrived just late enough to justify expansion. She hacked into an internal umbrella server and found predictive models. One file was labeled BAT man, integration, trajectory. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Graphs projected neurological degradation within weeks, behavioral volatility, increased lethality, eventual loss of executive control. Umbrella did not fear him. They were measuring him. She encrypted the data and sent it to the cave. Bruce watched the projection without blinking. "So they're waiting," he said. "For what?" Barbara's voice crackled through the comm. "For me to finish the job." He began to test the limits. In the cave's lower chamber, he faced reinforced steel plates suspended from chains. He struck once. The plate dented inward like soft clay. He struck again. It tore free. His breathing remained steady. He increased the load. Concrete blocks shattered under his grip. He felt no strain. He felt something else. Permission. The whisper no longer sounded external. It braided with his own thoughts. "You can end this." He imagined tearing through Umbrella's facility alone. No infiltration, no stealth, just force. He saw guards crumpling, scientists fleeing, systems collapsing. He saw containment failing. He saw the virus spilling into Gotham unrestrained. He saw himself standing in the center of it, immune, alone. Gordon called after midnight. "There's another release," he said without preamble. "East Side Hospital, Pediatric Wing." Bruce was already moving. He reached the hospital before the sirens converged. Inside, nurses struggled to restrain children writhing in fever. The infection had been aerosolized through ventilation. He felt it instantly, the viral signatures flaring like beacons. He moved room to room. He did not hesitate. He did not allow transformation. He ended it before it could begin. A nurse tried to block him. "You can't." He pushed past her gently at first, then less gently. When he finished, the wing was silent. Small bodies lay under sheets, too large for them. His gloves were red. Gordon arrived minutes later and stopped in the doorway. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, hoarsely, "Get out." Bruce did not argue. He left through the broken window. Behind him, the nurse sank to the floor. "I saw him fall," she whispered to no one. "I saw him fall into something else." Umbrella's chairman watched the hospital footage in a dim office. "Escalation achieved," he said softly. The scientist beside him swallowed. "Public opinion will turn. Of course it will. And then we offer a solution." He turned toward the window overlooking the biocontainment facility. "Enhanced operatives, controlled augmentation, heroes without instability. And Batman?" The chairman's smile returned. "He will prove the necessity." Back in the cave, Alfred cleaned blood from the armor in silence. Bruce stood at the edge of the platform, staring into darkness. "I counted them," he said. Alfred did not ask who. 27. His voice did not break. "That is what frightens me," Alfred replied. Bruce closed his eyes. He tried to summon grief. He found only calculation. The virus did not erase memory. It thinned it. Edges dulled. Regret softened. Efficiency sharpened. "I can feel them," Bruce murmured. "Every infected cell in the city. It's like a map in my head. And what does the map tell you? That this is only the beginning." Alfred stepped closer. "Then we must end it before you do." Bruce looked at him. For a fraction of a second, Alfred saw the boy in the alley. Then it was gone. "If I go after Umbrella now," Bruce said, "I won't stop at evidence." Alfred's hands trembled. "And if you wait?" Bruce's gaze drifted toward the rising white walls across the river. "Then I won't be able to stop at all." Outside, Gotham's lights flickered against the poisoned sky. Inside, the man who had sworn to be its guardian stood at the edge of becoming its executioner. Power had entered his blood like a promise. It was keeping that promise. And somewhere beneath the cowl, beneath the muscle and the mutation, a smaller voice still tried to speak. It was getting harder to hear. History is a liar with good posture. It stands straight at podiums and calls slaughter strategy. It calls compromise wisdom. It calls the dead necessary. Gotham would one day build plaques. It would polish the bat symbol and teach children that a man fought monsters in their place. It would not teach them how many monsters wore human faces. It would not teach them how many of those faces were his. This is what the city remembers when it stops pretending. I, the man who saved 1,000. They called him Dr. Harlow before they called him traitor. He had been a virologist, recruited by Umbrella Corporation, fresh out of Cambridge, bright-eyed and precise, convinced that catastrophe was simply an equation waiting to be solved. He signed non-disclosure agreements with steady hands. He told himself the funding would allow him to do good inside a system that required compromise. He believed oversight was enough. When Spencer Mansion burned, Harlow was in a lab 3 floors beneath the earth, monitoring strain variations that were never meant to see daylight. He saw the footage before the public did. He watched the bat move through corridors that Harlow had helped design. He saw the detonation from a camera that melted seconds later. He resigned the next morning. Umbrella declined to accept it. They reminded him of clauses, of penalties, of the reach of contracts that did not end at borders. So he began to steal. Not money, not data that would profit him. He siphoned research antiviral prototypes shelved for being non-viable, containment flaws, internal projections that predicted urban spread as a marketing opportunity. He encrypted everything. He sent fragments anonymously to journalists, to federal agencies, to anyone who might care. Most of it vanished. Some of it reached Barbara Gordon. The night the pediatric wing fell, Harlow broke into his own lab. He bypassed biometric locks with hands that had once calibrated centrifuges for praise. He accessed a vault containing a strain labeled for field testing and escalation designed to respond to high-resilience host organisms. Batman, Umbrella had named him in their files without naming him. Harlow understood then that the outbreak was no longer about profit alone. It was about proof. They needed to show the world that unregulated heroes were the true hazard. He loaded a drive with everything. He called the only contact who had replied to him without threat. A burner phone rang in the cave. Bruce answered. "Who is this?" "A coward," Harlow said, trying not to be. He told him about the facility, about the predictive models, about the strain designed to push integration past the point of control. "You're not immune," Harlow whispered. "You're incubating." Bruce's silence stretched. "Meet me," Bruce said. They chose a train yard long abandoned. Harlow arrived with the drive in his coat and fear in his throat. Batman descended without sound. For a moment, Harlow felt hope. He saw the suit, the symbol, the myth. Then he saw the eyes. They were not fevered. They were empty. "You designed this," Bruce said. "I designed safeguards," Harlow replied. "They stripped them away. People died. Yes, you knew the risk. I thought I could control it." Bruce flinched almost imperceptibly. So did he. Sirens wailed in the distance. Umbrella security. Harlow held out the drive. "It's all here, the strain they're preparing. It's meant for you." Bruce took it. "Why?" he asked. "Because if you lose control publicly, they win." Gunfire cracked through the yard. Umbrella operatives flooded the tracks. Batman moved. He moved like something released. Harlow watched bones break in the strobe of muzzle flashes. He watched bullets flatten against armor and flesh that no longer behaved like flesh. He watched men fall who might have been as ignorant as he once was. When it was over, the yard was silent. Harlow stood trembling. "You have to expose them," he said. Bruce stepped closer. "You helped build this. I'm trying to unbuild it." Bruce's hand closed around Harlow's collar. For a second, Harlow thought he would die there not by infection, but by judgment. Then Bruce released him. "Run," he said. Harlow ran. He made it 3 blocks before a sniper round found the base of his skull. Umbrella issued a statement the next day, expressing sorrow over the loss of a disturbed former employee. The drive reached the cave. Harlow saved thousands in projections. He lost himself in practice. The city remembers him as a footnote. 2. The sidekick. No one saw. There was a boy in the Narrows who painted bats on brick walls. His name was Mateo. He was 14 and believed in symbols the way other children believed in saints. He had watched Batman leap across rooftops and decided that fear could be borrowed. He fashioned a mask from scrap leather and followed police scanners on a cracked phone. He never meant to fight. He meant to witness. The night of the hospital outbreak, Mateo was outside when the first ambulances screamed past. He followed on a bicycle with a bent wheel. He saw the bat crash through a window and disappear inside. He waited. He told himself he would see a miracle. Instead, he heard nothing. No shouting, no chaos, just silence settling like dust. When Batman emerged, Mateo saw something change. The way he moved, too smooth, too certain. Mateo pedaled closer. "Did you save them?" he shouted. Batman paused. For a heartbeat, the cowl tilted toward the boy. Mateo felt seen. Then Batman vanished into the night. The next week, Mateo followed him again, this time to the docks. Umbrella trucks idled under floodlights. Federal agents stood guard. Mateo hid behind a crate, watching. Batman descended. Violence unfolded in precise arcs. Mateo had never seen anything so efficient. He also had never seen anyone hit that hard. One agent flew backward into a container and did not get up. Mateo's breath caught. This wasn't like the stories. He stepped out without meaning to. "Stop," he yelled. It was a child's command. Batman turned. For a fraction of a second, the virus inside Bruce recognized heat, heartbeat, vulnerability. A calculation flickered. Mateo saw the eyes behind the cowl. They were not cruel. They were assessing. An agent raised a rifle toward the boy. Batman moved faster than thought. He crossed the distance and crushed the rifle's barrel. The agent fell unconscious. Mateo stared up at him. "I want to help," Mateo said. Batman looked at the boy's painted mask. He saw himself in an alley decades ago, small and furious at the dark. "Go home," Bruce said. Mateo shook his head. "I can carry things. I can warn people." Bruce felt the whisper coil. Liability, attachment, weakness. He turned away. Gunfire erupted from the far end of the dock. A stray round ricocheted. Mateo did not see it coming. Batman did. He lunged. Too late. The bullet tore through the boy's chest. Mateo collapsed into Bruce's arms. "I saw you," the boy whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "You're real." Bruce pressed his gauntlet against the wound as if pressure could negotiate with physics. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first apology he had spoken aloud in weeks. Mateo's fingers tightened weakly around the bat symbol on Bruce's chest. Then they went still. Umbrella's official report listed one civilian casualty due to crossfire initiated by vigilante interference. There was no plaque. Only a mural in the narrow Bat with a small shadow beside it. The shadow was never named. Third, the villain who was right too late, Professor Elias Trent, had warned them. Before Spencer. Before the docks. Before the hospital. He had stood before a city council hearing and testified that private biocontainment under corporate control was a structural inevitability toward disaster. "You cannot outsource ethics," he said into a microphone that distorted his voice. "You cannot patent restraint." He was dismissed as alarmist. Funding was cut. He was called obstructionist by Umbrella representatives who wore calm like armor. When the mansion burned, Trent did not gloat. He gathered data. He tracked infection vectors. He mapped the correlation between Batman's interventions and Umbrella's escalations. He saw the pattern. Power met power, and the city lay between. He began broadcasting pirate radio segments at night. "Gotham," he would say, voice crackling through static. "You are being taught to choose between monsters. You are being told that strength will save you. Strength is what is killing you." Some listened. Most did not. After the hospital, his audience grew. "They are designing a narrative," Trent warned. "A future where enhanced operatives replace flawed vigilantes. Where control is centralized, where fear is commodified." Umbrella traced the signal. Federal agents raided his apartment. Trent escaped through a fire escape and vanished into the Narrows. He sought Batman, not to fight, to confront. They met on a rooftop under a sky the color of bruises. "You see it now," Trent said without greeting. Batman stood at the edge, cape snapping in toxic wind. "I see many things. You are becoming their argument." Bruce did not deny it. "You cannot win this by being stronger," Trent continued. "They want escalation. They want you monstrous." "What do you propose?" Bruce asked. "Stop." The word hung between them. "Withdraw," Trent said. "Expose them. Let the system collapse under its own corruption. And leave Gotham defenseless." "It is not defended now," Trent replied. "It is occupied by narratives." Bruce felt the virus stir, irritated by abstraction. People were dying. Stopping felt like surrender. Trent stepped closer. "If you continue like this, you will prove them right." Sirens rose in the distance. Another controlled release, another calculated tragedy. Bruce looked toward the sound. He saw heat signatures blooming in his mind. He could end them faster than any containment team. He could save lives. He could add to the ledger. "I don't have the luxury of philosophy," Bruce said. He leapt. Trent watched him vanish into smoke. Days later, Trent's body was found in the river. Official cause: drowning. Unofficial cause: inconvenient clarity. His broadcasts lingered in recordings. Most were deleted. A few survived. He was right. Too late. Gotham tells these stories in fragments. The scientist who tried to unbuild a machine and was erased by it. The boy who mistook a weapon for a guardian. The professor who saw the trap and could not convince anyone to step out of it. And at the center of each memory, a figure in black. Not cackling, not triumphant, just present. Power had not made him cruel. It had made him certain. Certainty is the sharpest corruption. In the cave, Bruce watched news cycles twist events into digestible myths. He saw Harlow labeled unstable. He saw Mateo reduced to collateral. He saw Trent dismissed as radical.